Good morning, and I'm sorry, because most people are going to want to continue to yell about Ohio State, but we do, I think, contractually at this point, have to talk about Indiana. The game is coming up on Saturday. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder with me on the BWI Live Show. We are going to still be talking about Ohio State. Don't worry. Everything is going to be in context of Penn State's first loss of the season, but we are previewing the game coming up Saturday against the Hoosiers. Also on the show today, the BWI Mailbag, stuffed full of questions. Lots of questions about receivers coming up on the show. And, of course, because we have Ryan here and because we didn't talk about it on Monday, recruiting. We're going to be talking about who's coming to the game, not just you guys. Now, I'm not asking if you're tailgating or anything like that. Who's coming to the game, the important names to know for Penn State. And then, of course, we want to talk to you in the chat as well. So bring your thoughts, your prayers and concerns all to the BWI Live Show today. So off the top, we got to get the thoughts of our esteemed panel of experts today. So Fitz, it's Thursday. We are now turning that page. James Franklin tried to turn it pretty early in the week, but here we are. Where are you in terms of assessing the damage and moving on?
I mean, I'm in the point where nothing is really going to change with Indiana. Like, even if they beat Indiana by 40 or whatever, if the spread is kind of ridiculous, or kind of it's huge, right? So I'm of the opinion that's not going to change. Like, people are still going to focus on that, focus on Michigan. I know Maryland's coming up as well, which they can put points on the board, so that's a little bit dangerous. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that, is that there's been so much focus on the past, and I don't like to dwell on the past. That's not really what I go for. But stuff needs acknowledged, like there's plenty of things to go by. And we were talking to James Franklin last night, and there were a couple little like one-liners. I'm sure we're going to get to his press conference and practice and all that stuff, but there were a couple little one-liners. The one that I took away was we're going to try and get a win against Indiana, which he says it about every game. So whatever. But he also said, and we need to play well, which he never really throws that caveat in there. We need to play well. So there's an acknowledgement that there's something wrong. Like, there's something that has, obviously gone off the tracks, especially offensively. And that's what they need to fix here. So just the little things like that little acknowledgement that, hey, we kind of sucked on Saturday. And everybody knows that, especially the people in that building. They've taken this loss very hard. Not that that's any consolation to fans or anything like that, but it's been one of those situations where you can't do anything but move forward.
James Franklin was pretty, I don't want to say pretty transparent, because he's always, I think, he was less withholding of some of the realities and factualities. Another one you mentioned was talking about what he wanted to say if the team had won, which we can get into just a little bit later. Ryan, your thoughts on this upcoming list for Indiana? Just a broad view, good, bad, how does it look with the noon kick?
Well, we'll get into the names, here in a sec. I would say kind of as expected. I mean, I know they were hoping to get a couple guys maybe to come in from outside the region. Doesn't look like that's going to happen right now, just from digging over the last couple of days. But there's some quality players there, and there are a couple coming from out of the region, which kind of surprised me a little bit. We'll talk about that here in a sec. But kind of what I expected when Michigan is the next game, and of course that's going to be noon as well. I would say right now we're looking at a handful of scholarship guys, a couple younger players who I think will get scholarships down the road, 2027, 2026 guys they'll still be evaluating. We're still putting the list together, so I don't want to say, specifics on how many scholarship guys or anything like that. But right now we got a handful of quality scholarship players, guys I think we'll be talking about a good bit here in the months and years ahead. And I could still see a couple additions here tonight into tomorrow as well. So good list, about what I expected, especially with Michigan up next. I mean, a lot of these guys, I talked to so many players this week. They were like, yeah, I was invited to Indiana, thinking about it still, but most likely I'm going to be at the Michigan game. So that's
right,
kind of what I expected.
Fitz, I'm coming back to you for this one because I'm terrible at this. We have an app, and I don't talk about it nearly enough. So tell everyone about the app and where you can find On3 on your phone.
Yeah, you can find On3, the app, at the App Store. Go figure. But this is something that we've put quite a bit of time in at On3 to develop. And I know, like I said many times, like, people have always asked me, no matter where I'm at, do you have an app? And that's how people like to consume their content. This is good, especially with the push notifications. You can get when Ryan's stories come up, when your film rooms come up, we'll push those to your phone. You go right to them instead of having to wait around, having to check the site and things like that. And then, of course, you can also access the message boards and things of that nature. It is certainly something that we continue to try to or strive to improve at On3 as we work out the bugs, because this is a brand new product and there are bugs. No arguments there. But I think it's going to be something where people sort of flock to in the coming years.
Yeah, just to a public service announcement, the latest update I got is we're still working on it when it comes to videos embedded in the app and those two things working together. They're separate things. They're trying to marry together. So if you're checking out T. Frank's Film Room, I encourage you specifically to use Chrome and to use it on your web browser. But just as Fitz is talking about, that will be fixed. We'll have all of that integrated. And especially for game day, if you're a fan of the app, if you're a fan of a team, the app is the way to consume all the information, especially game day and with updates and, as Fitz talked about, with push notifications. Really great for that. Today's show sponsor is also really great for me. And I just have to say, like, I don't know why you guys haven't told me anything that I had something on my face, but I have football all over my face. And the only way I know to get it off is with Caldera Lab. Caldera Lab is a men's, I want to say it's skincare, but it's healthcare for me, because I did 3 film rooms. I watched Penn State, Ohio State about 4 times, and it showed on my face by Wednesday. I haven't slept this week. I haven't done a whole lot of things. Like, my wife's birthday is today, and I'm drowning in things I need to do. But here's the thing. I still look good on camera. And that's because of Caldera Lab. We have their skincare stuff and also their beard products. Life-changing beard products for me, because I used to have to spend 20 minutes getting an actual lather with an actual old-school straight razor to shave every morning. And down here, you know, this looks great today. The line on the beard is excellent because Caldera Lab and their beard products, including the shaving cream, literally takes me 10 minutes where it took me 15, 20 before. And that's if I'm being tired and lazy and all of those things. So calderalab.com. Use promo code BWI23 to get 20% off your purchase. And also, one of my things that I like the most, Fitz, and I know you've been using this a little bit more, is the big-ass brick of soap. But the exfoliating bar, excellent stuff that if you want to use and have better-looking skin, Caldera Lab can help you with it, as I wave around a brick of soap. What do you think, Fitz?
I love the brick of soap. I love the way you sell it as well. No, it's fantastic. I actually just shaved beforehand, put the beard shine on. So, you know, despite the loss, still looking shiny. And that's really what we're going for in our everyday life here. But yeah, the Caldera products are great. I really appreciate them supporting the show and really appreciate them supporting my face as well. So thank you to Caldera. I definitely am a fan.
Steven asked me a question here, and I don't know, a straight razor versus a safety razor. Not a straight, okay. A safety razor is the one with, I'm not using like an actual knife. I think I mean safety razor, Steven. So I apologize. I don't know the difference. I just know that instead of, it's not one of the ones that comes in a cartridge that has 3 heads and then you're breaking out by 24 hours later because you've just ripped all the skin off of your face. I just don't use that one. Fitz. We were at practice last night. You took a look at the defense. What was your assessment of that group after a Herculean effort that resulted in a 20-12 loss? How was the vibe on that side of the field, and what were the pertinent things you saw on Wednesday night?
Vibes were good. Obviously, I think Penn State's defense played a pretty good game on Saturday. Did what they needed to do. But I think they're in rhythm. I still think they're in rhythm. I think they're going to have an opportunity this week to, reestablish that dominance that they've had over the first 6 games of the season. But they were loose. You look at those linebackers running through interception drills and having a good time. I mean, that defense is so talented that it's easy to be confident. I think that is something where, I mean, you look at this team. We're not doing an hour-long show on the defense for a reason. Yeah. Like that. There's a reason for that. No Chop, no Amin, which not a surprise whatsoever. I mean, Chop left the game on Saturday, and James Franklin acknowledged him on Tuesday that he's not out for the season, but he's not available this weekend. I would think Amin was surprising because if you watch the Amin Vanover injury, Amin Vanover not a practice as well, but if you watch the injury, he went and planted and his knee went the wrong way, which is not a good thing. Yeah. But James Franklin came out after practice on Wednesday night and said, hey, he's, we're going to see what he can do this week, which to me, I mean, that's a win right there. Like, considering how bad it looked at the time, how much pain he looked to be in at the time, the fact that we were not writing an article about him being out for the season, I think is a plus. And on top of that, saying maybe he can go this weekend. You hope you don't need him this weekend. You hope you get to see more of Jameel Lyons, who, is bumped up there in the 2 deep with that. Defensive end, of course, you lose 2 guys out of a 5-man rotation. That's going to take a hit on depth, but you get those young guys in there and get them going, and hopefully for their sake, they heal up and they get healthy before they get back on the field.
So you talk about Jameel Lyons, and James Franklin was very complimentary of him last night. I'm just so impressed and surprised, because watching Jameel his senior season, very raw football player, unbelievably talented from a physical standpoint, and you could see it all come together. But are you surprised at where he is, or was your assessment of him different coming into this situation where, as James Franklin said, if they weren't so deep, he might have seen the field as a true freshman more than he has so far?
Yeah, that was actually something I had written ready to pop last week, because when he made that mention last week after practice on Wednesday, he said there's a couple of guys that, if it weren't for what was ahead of them, they would be playing. Lyons was one of those. Rappleyea was the other one. So those are the 2 guys that you look at and say they would be in the rotation if Penn State's defense wasn't, or Penn State's defensive end room, tight end room wasn't so deep. Now Rappleyea got hurt, missed the game on Saturday. Lyons been banged up a little bit, but they're exceedingly high on those guys, and nothing has changed there. I'm excited to see, the silver lining there is you get to see more of Lyons, hopefully this weekend. You lean heavy into the 3-man rotation and see what Lyons is able to do out there. Penn State's a better team than Indiana, so you get a chance to get out there, and maybe you would have seen him anyway. Maybe if Chop's out there, if Amin's out there, maybe you would have seen him anyway. But they're very high on his potential. He's ahead of schedule. I thought this would be a guy that takes a little bit to adapt to college. His academics were not sparkling coming out of Philadelphia, and he just kind of put his head down and got where he needed to go much faster than anybody expected. So this is not buzz that just came up just because he might get into the game this weekend. This has been sustained since August. I mean, they've been calling him a freak, and to be a freak in that defensive end room,
right?
That's kind of saying something, because that room is full of them.
Yeah, well, just the bend he has with his length is really impressive. And if he's put it all together, like Penn State, as you and I have talked about ad nauseum before, just the ability to find guys when you thought you were a little concerned about defensive end recruiting and keeping that cupboard full, it's pretty impressive. On the offensive side of the ball, nothing really changed. So I think Penn State fans clearly want a tectonic shift from the offense, but James Franklin, his process always remains constant. Some of the things that we saw, J.B. Nelson was with the team once again, wasn't with the starters like he was last week. So just super interesting, the process they went through of, I believe, trying to get as many reps for him as possible, get him ready for the game, and maybe it just didn't really click for him last week, and then having to put Vega back in there. We'll see how all of that shakes out. It sounds more likely he plays this week, but I have no faith anymore in any of this stuff, guys, because it seemed pretty clear that JB Nelson was back last week, and who knows. But if you want the full breakdown of the offense and what we observed, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, Nate Bauer took the bulk of that, of letting you know who was and wasn't participating and how they were participating, and of course Fitz's full comments over BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
If you want the full breakdown, you should read T. Frank's texts in real time, because he's going through the video. He's like, "Oh, I see this. I see this. I see this. Oh wait, never mind. That's not it. No, that was the fun. That's always the fun thing on Wednesday evening. It's like, I've got it. Okay, maybe I don't."
Yeah, so you're seeing half of a passing play, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be very interesting this weekend. I don't think, and then wait, no, never mind. I got to the other portion where they're doing something completely different. So even sometimes I'm surprised they let us see this stuff, and then it's completely incomplete. So you don't actually know what the whole game plan is for the weekend, which is by design. Let's get on to the Indiana visitor list, because I want to get Ryan back in on the show. Ryan, of course, is always in support on Wednesday nights, but living in Harrisburg, he's not with the group anymore. By the way, I miss you, Ryan. I haven't seen you in person in forever. Noon kick. I know that you talked about the Michigan game, but how much is the noon kick affecting this list as well, do you think?
I mean, I think it's more so senior, this is final regular season games, or a lot of guys with playoff games. I mean, noon kicks always impact things, right? But again, when you look at Michigan the following week, they're going to get a good group of quality guys. A lot of players talking about how this is, their final regular season game. A lot of players just want to put a focus on that this week, especially if they're not in the playoffs. Then you got a lot of other guys who are, again, switching their focus to upcoming playoffs and things like that. I just had a lot of players, discussing, hey, it's just not a good week for visiting any school, really, as they want to, finish off their high school season strong. So I think that was a big part of it. As far as like getting into the guys who are visiting this weekend, a couple guys who stand out to me. I think the most important, the most notable one right now has to be Naishawn Montgomery, top 100 wide receiver out of Florida. A guy who's ranked number 84 in the country by On3, pretty much 4-star at all 4 major sites, and has been on campus before. I believe it was back. He didn't come to the blue-white game. I think it was the day before the blue-white game. He couldn't stick around for the blue-white game. I don't know if he went to another school or what it may have been that day, but I know he wasn't on campus in April. But we're going to be talking about receivers a ton here, not just the rest of the season, but I think as the transfer portal opens and obviously
we got tons of receiver conversation coming up in the mailbag. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm sure. So look, he's 2025, right? And Penn State fans are looking for immediate answers, and we'll see if they're able to do that. They're certainly still chipping away at 2024 guys, and I think that there has to be an addition, somebody for wide receiver in 2024, whether it's one of those top ranked guys that Penn State fans and Sean and I have been discussing for a long time, or somebody who kind of emerges onto the scene here late. Time will tell, but I feel like that has to be. At least they got to get somebody in. So again, that doesn't really impact Montgomery much. He's a 2025 guy, but he is an elite receiver and somebody that they're really going to be pushing hard for. Visited LSU a couple of times, Florida, Miami, USC. He's got all types of great offers. 6'1", 165. So decent frame there. Could add some weight, of course, with time, but he's also a junior. But
can I jump in here and ask you kind of a follow-up question about receiver? We're not even a year in, and I think the initial assessment of a position coach is always tough because it's hard to make your mark. And I guess I don't want to throw players under the bus is not what I'm trying to say, but it's hard to make your mark as a position coach in recruiting and with players in less than a year. But what's your assessment generally of Marcus Hagens so far in the recruiting department? Have they gotten more guys interested in the program that are like Naishawn Montgomery? I know 24 is difficult, but I guess generally a check-in about how receiver recruiting is going, positive or negative, I think fans would appreciate.
They got 2 quality 4-star guys in Josiah and Tyseer. Josiah, of course, with that injury, though, that is not good. And not saying he was a guy who could absolutely come in and make an early impact, but they certainly wanted to get his speed on the field, right? I kind of look at Quentin Martin, a couple other guys as players that will get on the field early. Not sure Josiah would have been one of those guys, but look, you need top 100 guys, top 150 guys. We talk about it all the time. It's not easy. There's a lot of guys out there, but there's a lot of other schools that can sell wide receiver success better. Not necessarily better than Penn State. They've had a couple guys, but they don't have, I guess, maybe some of the big time numbers, the big time draft numbers that some other schools can. And yes, I know about Dotson and other guys. I get all that, but it's not as easy, I think, as people want to make it out to be. Yes, wide receiver is deep usually in a lot of classes, but and that's kind of where Penn State may have to go here, is kind of finding a guy who's emerging here late, someone who maybe put up some numbers, track numbers and good stats and all those kind of things here late in the year. They may have to add a guy who maybe doesn't have all the 4 stars and the top 150, but somebody who can maybe make an impact down the road. I mean, I think Hagens has done pretty much what I expected him to do, right? Did we expect him to come in here and land 3 top 100 guys, Sean? I didn't really expect that. But I also want to give him the 2025 class to see what he can really do before I totally judge it.
Yeah, Fitz, what are your thoughts there?
I'll agree with that. Like you're going to judge him on the first cycle. Like I know that the production has not been what you want it to be. I think there's a lot of, with receiver, they call it a dime a dozen position, and that's not really a disrespect to, the players that are there, but there are so many of them, and some of them hit, some of them didn't. They found guys that really haven't, and I think that's the issue here. And that's kind of why Stubblefield's not here anymore. The recruiting aspect of it. I mean, I don't think there's any question to that. So to judge a guy on his first year, he's been here for what, 9 months, something like that. It's a bit premature, but that's a position that needs fixed quickly. They thought, this was another kind of direct comment from Franklin last night. They thought that the transfer guys might help them out a little bit more than they have. Those guys haven't done it. They're not as good as they thought they were. They're not as good as they were at their previous institutions. And at some point, you got to pivot and spin. And Penn State hasn't been able to do that just because they don't have the guys.
Portal's just going to be absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Absolutely massive. for that position.
Fitz, getting back to the list, is there anybody that catches your eye that's coming in this weekend?
Diabell is coming. He was supposed to come up to the whiteout. There's a couple of these guys from Florida that were supposed to come up for the whiteout, and they looked at the weather report and they're like, "Hey, 70s and sunny in October. Where should I go? Central Pennsylvania." Because Diabell is going to come up. Jaron Hughley, who is Jaywan Sider's nephew, a couple of really good quarterbacks from the Sunshine State. Hughley, a really good athlete. I'm not sure he's a quarterback, but maybe a safety or something like that, but also a couple of good athletes. So a couple of good guys from Florida. And, when you take a look at this list overall, Penn State, Indiana should not be drawing a ton of guys for a noon kick, especially from Florida. So they're going to get these guys up. They're going to check them out. Diabell, of course, the son of Raja Bell. We talked about him, I think, before the whiteout, when he was supposed to come up. There's a lot of upside there. He's been on campus before. He worked out for Mike Yursich. They offered him after camp. He's a good little player right there at American Heritage, one of the top programs in the in Florida. So getting these guys up from the South, again, it doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, especially with Michigan being the big game. But there's an opening in the schedule. You're going to accommodate those guys as such. So
just one thing to add to that: Montgomery and Hughley have a bye week, and then Diabell plays tonight. So that's why that worked out. They don't play on Fridays.
Is Diabell? You got a sense if he's a true 6'1"? Just looking at him on film,
he is.
Not the biggest guy in the world, but looks like he's got decent size.
Yeah, those numbers are correct. Yeah, he camped up Penn State this year. Back in July, and that's when he earned his offer. So all those numbers are correct. We'll see how he keeps developing. The stats aren't anything great, but it's his first year starting, and he's playing at American Heritage, which plays some of the best competition in the country. So don't want to put too much stock into that, right? I mean, I look more at the fact that he's got Florida and Miami and some quality offers out there. I thought he visited Notre Dame. Doesn't have a Notre Dame offer yet, but certainly a guy that, again, you come up to camp, work out with the staff. It makes sense, a lot of sense for an early offer there. But like all these guys, man, how he develops here in the months ahead will really impact him. But he's a quality athlete. I think he tested pretty well too. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do remember looking at those numbers and being impressed. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I said he's got the genes, so he's got pro basketball genes. Those help.
Yeah. Any other names? Anybody else, Ryan, you want to highlight?
Montrez Walker, we got to mention him. He was formerly committed to Michigan, linebacker prospect out of Buford, Georgia. Again, another Southern guy coming up this weekend. Interesting. The thing with Walker, he's 5'11-ish, 215, like quality player size wise is certainly the thing that I think really kind of keeps most schools still kind of scouting and keeping him interest. But will that impact where he ultimately ends up? I mean, he did commit to Michigan, ultimately decommitted. I think Penn State, he's certainly a quality player. At just 3 more inches, I think we'd be talking much more highly about him and maybe for Penn State's chances of kind of pushing hard for him. So we'll keep an eye on him. Plays at a great school in Buford, plays against great talent, puts up good film. But again, 5'10 and a half, 5'11", and already at 215 as well. So how does he progress? How does he grow there? And does he really fit long term, especially in a Penn State defense that looks for guys that can get as James likes to say, was it 53 and a third? I'm not sure how well he fits in there. And they have quality middle linebacker. You look at Clatterball, and of course they got Specker coming in. Like, they have quality middle linebackers. Is that something they really need to push for 2025? Still kind of TBD.
Any final thoughts here on the list, or what you're looking for in the next couple of days? Because, Ryan, if I can describe your job, it's work progressively on things that happen, and suddenly Thursday and Friday, it all snowballs on you. So, what's at the corner of your eye about what's coming up this weekend? Anything?
Yeah, we have a story up right now with a couple other guys who kind of, just confirmed late last night, early morning. We'll keep them quiet right now, for everybody who subscribes at the moment. Some other quality, players who hold a Penn State offer, or, have certainly a handful of Power 5. One of those guys is a 4-star prospect, only one of 100 players right now for 2026 to be rated. So just got to keep an eye on how this list grows here over the next 48 hours or so. But again, should be a handful of scholarship guys, handful of potential walk-ons. There are some interesting 2027 kids. I'll mention one of them. Is it Armin Hill, I believe it is, from West Mifflin? Put up almost 500 yards rushing a couple weeks ago.
In a game?
In one game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keep an eye on him.
Important clarification there.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, doesn't I think he has a UNLV offer or something like that. Again, he's just a freshman. He's only this is his first year playing, but yeah, certainly. I mean, did some really good things in that film, and I get it. It's high school film, crazy stats. How much stock can you put into that? Well, I think Penn State saw some things there that they really like. But again, 2027, we got 4 years to talk about it.
We got a question in the chat, so we're going to get to that right now to wrap up our recruiting conversation. Eric Eisler, he says, Jeremiah Seaton at Blake on your radar. Just got his first Power 5 offer. Might be one of the best 2025 backs in the DMV. I know that Fitz is a big DMV guy, so what's your assessment on this situation?
Yeah, I looked at him. I looked at Jeremiah last week. He's the younger brother of Jordan Seaton, the offensive lineman that was at St. John and then went down to IMG. Jordan is an incredible offensive lineman. He's I'm not sure where he's going to end up. I think he took an official at Colorado. He took a couple other big time officials. He's not going to end up at Penn State. Penn State was never in the mix for him for a few reasons. But Jeremiah is a good player. Tennessee and Maryland so far. Penn State's got 2 backs though. I don't know what Seaton's flexibility would be, but Penn State has 2 backs in the 2025 class in Keandre Barker and oh my goodness, that's awful. Tyke Hayes. So that's going to be tough for them to get out there. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they kept offering 2025 kids at that position, just because that's the nature of the beast these days, to be in it in case you want to be in it. But very tough to see them have to or try and switch gears away from those guys. Still haven't heard much from Barker that would indicate that he's leaning any other way. But that's a long way away from home. So you got to protect yourself at home, take care of these guys. But Seaton's a good player. Yeah, like I said, looked at him last week. His profile is going to continue to grow. And of course, with his brother there, Tennessee, I think is in on Jordan as well. That's going to be something that helps elevate his profile early in the process.
I love that we've got contacts in the DMV. We've got family members of commits in the chat. Love it when you guys bring the heat. Makes my job so much easier. So that'll be what we're going to be. Again, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is where you go to get all the information. You can sign up right now. You missed the big game special, but it's still well worth your money to sign up and get all the inside information from Ryan and from Fitz, because they do a great job of sourcing and giving it to you in a condensed version. And you can also find a ton of like-minded people in the 2025 and 2026 chat threads on the board. Let's get to Penn State, Indiana. Huh? Penn State plays Indiana this weekend. It's a noon kick, and we're not going to be talking almost at all about Indiana, I don't think. The defense. Let's start with the defense, because despite the fact that they nearly got Penn State points, kept Penn State in the game the entire time, we haven't talked about them at all this week. So I guess the question being, how do I put this? Do you expect a letdown game from this group after pouring their soul into that game against Ohio State, keeping a very explosive offense in check for most of the game before? I just want to say fatigue and just number of opportunities allowed Ohio State to score enough points to win the game. Is there a letdown opportunity here, Ryan, do you think?
It better not be. Indiana is not good. I think they're the worst team in the Big Ten. I mean, you can make an argument for Northwestern, Purdue, maybe, but from what I've seen so far, they are not. I think they're in line for a coaching change. I think that's going to probably happen here. So, no, I expect. My prediction was 45-7. I think it was. I mean, pretty much.
You haven't seen the show. Save that for later.
What's that?
You haven't seen the show in a while. Save that for later. We got a whole prediction.
All right. Anyway, no, I don't expect a letdown. I expect them to come out. And I expect, we'll get the Penn State's offense, but I expect Penn State's offense to come out and score early too. Indiana's allowed touchdowns to every one of their 3 of their 4 conference opponents. The only ones they held was Michigan, and then Michigan scored 8 straight, after 2 first drives. So no, yeah. I expect Penn State to come out and perform well here, and we'll see how it goes.
Fitz, this is an unanswerable question, I think, from a real deep understanding, but is there potential for division in the locker room? It's a thing that I think fans and people outside can speculate about. What is your opinion on keeping the team pointed in the right direction, and that conversation about leadership that we've had all offseason? Does this team have the leadership to overcome losses? What's your view of that situation heading into this game?
I think it's human nature, in the sense of this is a one-sided team right now. One side is very good, the other side is not very good, and you need the not very good side to win the football games, to put points on the board. And I think that there's just going to be some natural animosity, I guess you would say. Division's so tough because you kind of have to split it off into two, but like, how many times can the defense go into the post game and say, hey, we didn't do our job because we gave up too many points, when you gave up 20 points to the number 3 team in the country at their stadium?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a surprising thing. So no, I think that's something you got to get back some kind of confidence. I think this game is going to be like the first 6 games. And like, what do you take from the first 6 games? What do you take from this game? Probably not that much, because of where Penn State has put those aspirations and expectations. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a situation where you're clawing at each other's throats, but it's like, come on, man, just get a first down, like, especially this past weekend.
Yeah,
I do agree with Ryan in that Indiana, not good. My close friend, Zach Osterman at the Indy Star, called me the other day. He's like, buddy, no matter what you think about Indiana, they're worse. So it was like, oh, okay. Yeah, good to know. Ryan mentioned that there's probably going to be a coaching change. They got to find the money to do so. It's kind of like West Virginia last year. It's like, how long can you hold on to this to get that buyout as low as palatable for the Indiana people? But that's kind of where it's at. I mean, Tom Allen had this thing by the tail 3 years ago, and all of a sudden they're the worst team in the Big Ten. I mean, it's extremely hard to win at Indiana. Like that's kind of how that's been Indiana's entire existence for the most part. So sustainability has never been there. But yeah, they've come down hard. And look at who's at or near the top of the Heisman list is their former quarterback, who is now at Washington, Michael Penix. That's a very tough pill to swallow when you're looking at guess how not to build a program. So yeah, Indiana is gonna help out Penn State this weekend. It could be one of those things. I mean, they've been sluggish. They were sluggish against Northwestern and scored 40 some point. It can be one of those things that fluffs up the points per game. The 30-point streak is no longer intact, but I can see it being one of these games where Penn State, even if they don't play well, can still win by a lot. And what solace is that? Not much. That's kind of where we're at with the expectations.
Kind of going off of maybe the one area of the defense that did not perform to the level you thought would be Kalen King against Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you guys think, Ryan, do you think that Kalen King confidence game, does he need to get some of that back, or do you think he's got the DNA of a guy that is a true corner, which is just move on and then you'll dominate the next guy? Like, how are you viewing his confidence in this game? He's
an incredibly confident individual. I don't have any doubts on that, but Marvin Harrison lit him up in that game. And I think there were times where Penn State could have maybe helped Kalen a little bit more. They certainly put a lot on his shoulders in that game, but he's going to be challenged again in a couple of weeks with McCarthy and Michigan's receivers. He's still a quality player. He's still going to be a top. I mean, I certainly expect him to probably be a first-round draft pick. But I mean, his whole season, I will say, I mean, when you compare it to last season, it's been down a little bit compared to kind of maybe what the expectations were. But I don't see him losing a lot of confidence in himself. I mean, Kalen's always been an incredibly confident individual.
With the defense and the lack of defensive ends at the moment, going into this game, we're not worried about red shirts at this point with Jameel Lyons. I just want to kind of come back on that conversation from earlier, because I know he's right there. There was one game where he got in for literally one snap. So just curious about what your thoughts are of him playing, not playing this weekend, Fitz.
Yeah, he's going to play. Their plan was not to redshirt him. It just didn't work out. He got bumped up. I believe he didn't make the Northwestern trip. It was. So there was a little bit in there. But yeah, they're going to have to play him. Like, to me, like, even if Chop was borderline, keep Chop out. Even if Amin borderline, keep Amin out and let those guys go after it. And, hopefully you put yourself in a position where he can learn on the fly enough and make enough play. I mean, I think he's athletic enough, aggressive enough, maybe too aggressive at times. You have to learn to play in that little bubble, that little window there. And he's had it a few times, but no, I mean, I think you play him and you're trying to get the most out of it. And that's kind of where you're at. And that's kind of the difference with defense and offense is, like, you can play the guys like that and feel confident that the drop off won't be that much. Whereas, you look at up plus the spot like receiver and you're not ready to go to those young guys for a reason. So There's a lot going for Lions at this point. You expect Indiana to have to throw the ball. When you're a young defensive lineman, pin your ears back and go. That's kind of the ideal situation. So if you're Penn State, you hope to get up early. As Ryan said, they give up a lot of touchdowns early. Penn State has been terrible on opening drives this year. Yeah. It's been since the Delaware game, I think they haven't scored so that's been an issue all season long. So that's something they need to remedy. And Rutgers ran it 55 times last week. I know we're switching back to offense here. Rutgers ran it 55 times last week, threw it 12. That's some sort of blueprint there, right? I'm not an offensive coordinator, but there's something there that you can maybe make it work.
So we spent 5 minutes, I think, here on the defense out of 3 hours so far on all three collective shows this week. So let's talk about the offense, guys. We were just I felt bad. Like we had to talk about them for a little bit. Stephen Light says about the offense, it's like having a dead body in the closet. Sure, you can ignore it, but eventually you're going to have to do something about it. Steven, by the way, I said this on Saturday in the postgame. Steven is one of our bedrock people here of the show, one of our regulars. Also a very level-headed, always very in perspective sort of guy. He's out on the offense, like hard now. So it has taken it out of a lot of people. So, Ryan, who needs to have the biggest bounce back game? Who needs to have a bounce back game in this against Indiana? As Fitz said, James Franklin said, we need to play well. Who needs to play well this week?
Well, Steven, first off, how many dead bodies have you had in your closet?
That's morbid, man.
Kind of intrigued here. I love you, man. Steven's great. What was the question, T. Frank? I'm sorry. I was thinking about dead bodies.
Who needs to play well?
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Drew Aller, you got to start with, I guess, right? I could argue Harrison Wallace. I could argue some of the younger wide receivers need to step up. But Drew needs to get his confidence back. And we saw that in that post-game press conference where he was quite emotional. And that's not something Greg and I were talking about the other day. Like, when's the last time you saw a player that emotional after a game? And the first thing that kind of came to me was Trace McSorley in the Rose Bowl after he, threw 2 interceptions. And, he wasn't quite as emotional as Drew was, which is interesting to me as well, considering, he's only a handful of games into his career. But Drew's kind of the easy answer there. I can point out some offensive linemen. Hunter Norzad has played pretty well this season. Certainly got beat up a couple times there in the Ohio State game. You can point to a couple guys there, but it all starts with Aller. We know Drew has a ton of potential. I think fans a little more worried about him after that game. I'm not quite there yet. I still think he's a very good quarterback. I know fans want to see bigger stats and some flashier throws, but I still think Drew's a quality player. He's going to get Penn State. I don't know if they're going to get there this year, but he's going to get Penn State in the playoff, I think, here next year, and he'll continue to grow as a player. But you got to start with Drew.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in the mailbag, so I'll save some of my thoughts about the Drew Aller conversation.
I need to just read this rundown. I'm sorry, I was trying to get that recruiting story out.
That was absolutely that's I'm talking about the chat. So the chat is having its own conversation about Drew Aller that we're going to talk about in the mailbag. But it is very interesting because somebody asked a good question that I'm going to save the phrasing for later. Fitz, to you, offensive player that needs to have the bounce back game that you think will help things look good besides the point total.
I mean, come on, how can you pick one? Like, they were across the board. Who was Penn State's best offensive player against Ohio State? Jeez. I mean, crickets. Caden Wallace, maybe that.
Not Theo Johnson. Maybe Caden Wallace. Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at with that. So, how do you pin it into one? I mean, Ryan's right. The most important is quarterback, because he's your quarterback, and you're gonna continue to go with him despite what the chat says. No, it's kind of everybody. It's like, okay, so I put that stat out about Rutgers running 55 times. That's great. Does Penn State need to come out and do that? Do they need to come out and reestablish the run game and be tough and everything like that they want to be up front? Not necessarily, because you got to get those receivers going. It's like, if it's not one thing, it's the other. You got to get everybody going, and I don't know that there's a formula for that. The formula is points. The formula is, for this offense, first downs. First downs are so vital to what they try to do. And when
can I ask you, Fitz? James Franklin talked about efficiency and being good in leverage situations as the offense's identity, and I think a lot of people think identity is smash mouth football, throwing the football, not necessarily situational football. Can you lean on situational football, which is dictated a lot by your opponent as much as it is you, as your identity? And I think that was kind of my big takeaway from the game is doing the hard things well is what James Franklin talked about, the identity of the offense, converting long drives. That always felt unsustainable, and we saw that happen in the game against Ohio State. So I guess what's your opinion on that is that sustainable? Is that something they can take forward into games against Maryland and Michigan later to be their identity and succeed with?
I mean, we saw proof on Saturday that it's kind of not, right? Like it's kind of the situation where if you can't do that, you need to spin off and do something else. I mean, that was the takeaway on the Monday show was that, hey, if your identity is going to be a team that strings along drives and you can't get third downs, what do you have to turn yourself into? And that's the tough one because you don't know. And you don't know if the weapons are there to turn to a big play offense. You don't know if you want to be a ground and pound, if you want to put yourself in a situation where you're running that short yardage play on 3rd and 1. Whatever it was, like where was it? And that's kind of what you're looking at with this team. Do the hard things well. That's great against Northwestern and Illinois and some of the teams that they've played, but like doing the hard things against Ohio State and Michigan are a completely different animal. So like, I don't know, like that's a very good question. And I'm not sure that there's an answer to that because the answer has to be, what do you pivot to? And we haven't seen what they pivot to.
Yeah. Let's get to your predictions for the game because we got to get to the mailbag. There's a lot of things that people want to know after the Ohio State loss. So Ryan, give us your score prediction for Indiana and kind of nutshell why you think it's going to go that way.
Yeah, like I said earlier, sorry, I jumped the gun. 45-7 is my prediction. 45-10, actually, I think is what I wrote on the board. I gave him an extra field goal at the end. But I don't know. I think Penn State should come out plenty motivated for this one. Indiana cannot stop the run to save their lives. But we said the same thing against Northwestern. So I don't know what to think at this point. We saw Nick have a little bit of success at times, and we'll get into this a little bit. I think one of these mailbag questions kind of hits on the running in the Ohio State game. But I just think Indiana is not a good team. But it doesn't really even matter how much Penn State wins this by. Sean's been saying it's all about the game in 2 weeks for Penn State fans to get some confidence back in this program and where things are going. Penn State should do well on this one. I still think Maryland's kind of a bit of a fraud. After watching them against Illinois, I still feel like Penn State should go down and get that win. And then we'll see on November 11th. But 45-10 is my prediction. I don't expect Indiana to put up much of a fight.
Fitz, what do you got? You're muted.
The one time, yes.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah, thank you. Very similar. I was waiting for my score to pop up so I could remember what it was. No, very similar to the Northwestern game in that I think you can sort of sleepwalk your way over 30 and then potentially over 40 in the second half because the depth difference on both sides of the ball is very different. Also, speaking of graphics on the YouTube, people would love that score, T. Frank, but it's Indiana this week, and they're not going to win 41-6 over Ohio State.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, I've got 41-6. I think Penn State can move the football on the ground, and again, what solace is it going to be? What comfort is there going to be? Not really that much. But it's going to be 70 and sunny. So if you're going to be there, like enjoy yourself. Like it's going to be, this is a treat in late October. I remember years ago when it was Minnesota and, they're closing the lots because of snow. Enjoy this one. Like, because that's the part that you need to enjoy. No, I think Penn State's going to be able to control this one. Limit mistakes like Penn State Northwestern was that opening kickoff fumble. You limit those little mental gaffes like that. This defense is not going to allow Indiana, I don't believe, to do really much of anything. So they're going to have the opportunity to have another one of those games. And again, what's it worth? I don't know. It's 2-game season, and that's where at least that's where the chat is hanging out this week. 2-game season, and that's kind of where we're at.
I almost texted you guys before the show and I said, hey, I haven't slept well, so like prepare for some of those graphics whoopsies. So I knew they were coming. I didn't know when they would be there, and there they are. Here's one that won't be. We got to get to the BWI mailbag, and I made that months ago. Get right into the first question here. This one coming from Stephen Light, who I think has a question, a real opinion about the offense. What single change do you think is necessary to see the offense get going during this game? Ryan, what do you think? What's the one change they could make that can help improve offensive performance and efficiency?
Running and consistently being able to do that. It takes a lot of pressure off of Drew. It takes a lot of pressure off the receivers to find space, but they haven't really been able to consistently crank out big runs all year. So it's hard to say, but I mean, you can also argue the wide receivers just need to kind of step up their game and learn how to create some better space. But I'll go with the running game getting going and giving Drew Aller and others, just overall confidence, man, because right now, this offense has very little confidence, or at least after that game, they should.
Fitz, what do you got? What's your big change this week you'd like to see?
Single change, like that's tough because you talked about earlier this week throwing over the middle of the field, or just using the middle of the field in general. That'd be nice too. But I would like Drew to pull the ball like a couple of times, like just give them something to be aware of. Like even if it's a 3 or 4 yard gain and he slides, just give them something to be aware of, because this running game is, dependent on the threat of a quarterback run, and it's just not there. And they got to it a little bit late, but there's just no threat whatsoever. Take the reins off, man. Like, you're trying to protect this kid from throwing interceptions. You're trying to protect this kid from taking hits. And I get that, like, on the surface, but like at some point your offense is hamstrung because of it. And that's really what you're trying to do. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying free Drew. I'm just saying, like, do a little bit that puts some of that stuff in doubt, because when some of that stuff is in doubt, that's when good things can happen.
So it's interesting going through some of the YouTube comments, which I don't suggest to everybody. There's a significant portion of the chat, and there's a significant portion of people that watch these videos that say that this offense needs to put in Beau Pribula because they're not using the RPO. By the way, you mean read option. Read option is when you're deciding whether the quarterback runs the ball or the running back runs the ball. RPO is when the quarterback decides if he throws the ball or the running back runs the ball. It's an important distinction there, even though they are used interchangeably, even by analysts on television. But the reality of this offense is they're not, like, it's not even really a part of the game the way it used to be with Trace McSorley and Sean Clifford. Last season, they got more away from that. I think part of it because they wanted to preserve their quarterback, and here they are doing that. He has one run for 5 yards in read option situations this year. So it's not really a part of the offense as much as it used to be. And you're right, there is no dynamic threat putting a lot of players in conflict. It's kind of in a box. And freeing Drew, I think, is a part of the conversation of exactly what you just said. And that dovetails perfectly into ear to the ground. Is there any hindsight regret sense from the staff not mixing it up with Beau Pribula last Saturday? The chat wants Beau Pribula to start, guys. They want him to be the quarterback because of what we just talked about with the read option game. Ryan, I'm going to come back to you on this one. Your sense of the problems with switching quarterbacks or playing not a 2-quarterback system, but using 2 quarterbacks. Regret, not regret? How do you think you handle this with an offense that is sputtering?
This won't be popular, but no regret. Look, Beau Pribula's ran the ball 3 times as much as he's thrown the ball this year. I get that he's in late game situations, but that kind of also tells you something. I think Beau needs to kind of prove a little bit more that he's not going to make mistakes when throwing the ball, and I think that's kind of his big, I don't want to say weakness, but the thing he needs to improve on. They feel comfortable with him running. There's no doubt about that. But Beau Pribula coming in that game, Ohio State's going to just absolutely load the box. They have no. I don't think they'd be scared at all about Beau Pribula being able to pick them apart. And again, I love Beau. I've watched Beau more than anybody here over the last couple of years at Central York. But Beau, Drew Aller is just on a different level when it comes to the arm and being able to find guys. But it all kind of also just comes back to, if you're going to find guys, those guys got to be open, and they were blanketed for the majority of that game.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to point out is, like, the cover 1 was a big part of the conversation, and they didn't get separation. There's not much you can do in those moments. This coming from David Greeter in the chat. He says, Frank, was OSU the interception game that Drew had to get out, where didn't throw an interception, but, you get the point there. Does he flip the switch now and say, okay, I have to take over and be the guy? response to the loss, Fitz. Do you think that, I don't want to say lights a fire under Drew, because that says like he didn't have a fire underneath him already, but is there an expansion of his game where he lets loose a little bit now that they have a loss?
Maybe. I think that's a bit more narrative than reality based. Like you can flipping the switch. I don't think that actually happens. But I understand the question as like, get that out of the way, and then maybe is a little bit loose. I think maybe a little bit, everybody's a little bit more loose because of the loss. And that sounds stupid because obviously everything is on that game. But like when you lose a game, you can loosen up a little bit because you don't have to sort of walk that high wire anymore. And I think that's really what you get out of it. Does anything change? I don't know. I mean, it's tough to look at that offense and see a ton of hope in terms of what they can do. You can look at it and say they're this bounce away or something like that, but I don't think they were that close on Saturday. And that's right. That's the hard part to stomach.
That was what I think James Franklin, his narrative after the game was. It was a 1-score game deep into the game, but what was the real threat of overcoming that 1 score with the way everything was working and the issues they have on offense? Getting to this question, I think we're going to address just parts of this question and not the full question. Sykem asks, were you surprised by the offensive line scores? And I'm assuming he means PFF here, especially center and right guard, particularly after, as Ryan, you said, Hunter had been playing well this season. It was his worst game of the year, possibly of his career, even considering he was playing injured last year. Ryan, were you surprised that Ohio State was able to take advantage of the interior of the line and run and pass the way they did?
They're an improved unit, but man, Ohio State is still elite. I know they don't have the Bosas and some of the other guys, but they're still elite defensive line. Yeah, those guys need to play better. I will say Caden Wallace played pretty well in that game, I thought. I just kind of haven't watched every single snap back from that game, but I have watched a good bit of it, and I thought Caden Wallace had one of his better games of the year. But I know we're talking interior, and it's kind of, I don't want to say what I've expected, but man, how many years have we seen this? How many years have we seen Ohio State's defensive line give, especially Penn State's interior and their tackles over the years, issues? So, yeah, I mean, I guess to some degree I expected a little bit better because I thought Penn State's offensive line was better this year. And I still think they are better compared to some previous years. But, they did struggle at times. I can't argue that.
I mean, there's two things here, right? Hunter Norzad played well the first half of the season. He did. And he got his butt handed to him at Ohio State. These are two things that can be true. So like, yes, he had improved, but then he came up against a force that overwhelmed him, and he was not good. So like, these two things are sort of separate points here, right? Like I'm not going crazy. Like he actually did play well, and then all of a sudden he just didn't against when that competition goes up. And that's a bit alarming when you're talking about the 2-game season and how you can compete with the actual threats in the Big Ten, but that's a different conversation. Like the kid played well, and then he didn't. That's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and I think we identified early in the week talking about it before the Ohio State game, and we identified it. James Franklin apparently identified it as well, saying like we liked their short yardage situations and that what they presented. So Penn State went into the game knowing that Ty Hamilton was an issue, and not having J.B. Nelson there, I think, in the run game specifically. Another thing we've hammered home this week is like Hunter Norzad does not play on an island. He's the center. He's supported by his guards. So like having a redshirt freshman next to you, there's I think part of that as well. Although individually he did not play well, irrespective of those things. Keem Beeman is the next question. Navy Blue, if Chop Robinson and Amin Vanover are expected to be out for a while, does someone move from defensive end to defensive tackle? He mentions Navy Blue in his full question. If they're forced to play Fisher and Lions against Michigan, Michigan will pound the ground. Right now, defensive tackle depth seems pretty good. Fitz, coming back to you. Your thoughts on potentially having to move somebody out if this is an extended injury situation?
Yeah, I think that's a conversation you have to have. I know that they've done it before, specifically to play a 5-tech. They kind of miss. Not that this defense is missing many pieces, but like Nick Tarburton would have been a really nice piece there. Zettel has played it before. They've moved guys out there, big defensive tackles or small defensive tackles or bigger defensive ends to play that position. So Zane Durant, Beeman, you may have to find yourself in a position where you get some reps for those guys. It's not going to be an all-out base defense change or anything like that. But like if you can't play Chop and you can't play Vanover, then all of a sudden you got to spin something, because those 3 defensive ends, and then the freshmen they'll get tired, So I think you have to have that at your disposal. You have to prepare for it, whether they do it or not. It depends on those guys' health.
Yeah. Ryan, I'm going to come to you with this question. GMAC wants to know, after a few days to process whatever it was that we all watched on Saturday, is there an immediate reaction that you possibly rethought or changed? Ryan, you were at the game. You saw everything kind of in person with all the visceralness. Is there something that you rethought this week?
That's a good question. I certainly was in the same boat as many others when it comes to Penn State should have ran the ball more. I think we saw those Nick Singleton runs early on, and they didn't materialize later in the game. One thing I will say though is Ohio State did a much better job kind of locking down that as the game went on. I mean, Nick had 44 yards rushing in the first quarter, and I think he had 6 more carries and 6 more yards after that. So
yep.
They kind of shut it down after that in the second and third quarter. But I haven't rewatched the entire game. I watched the first half of it and then just kind of you guys were kind of handling most of that, and I switched over to recruiting on Tuesday. But I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts on how that game could have went.
Go to T. Frank's film room, and you'll see all of the information about how all of that went down.
Kind of bracketing. How many times did they bracket Maserati Marv?
Yeah.
Was there a ton of that, T. Frank? I mean, you watched?
Honestly, I spent the entire time. This is the reality. I spent the entire time watching the Penn State offense multiple times. I did not get to review the defense because I ran out of time. We were on to James Franklin's press conference, and we're here. Like, I blinked and we're sitting down to do this show. So for me, just quickly, it was I went back and forth on Drew quite a bit of what was his responsibility in the loss and the breakdown of the performance. And I went from it was not on him to there was clearly deficiencies in him to it was not on him, back to there were areas that I thought he clearly played worse than he has in the past. So I vacillated on Drew Aller and his part to play in that quite a bit this week. And, I still don't have a firm setting on where I should feel about how he performed. Fitz, any quick thoughts on that? And then we got to get to the receiver conversation because we got a lot of questions and not a lot of time.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I'm going to be able to continue to say, I like Gus Johnson, but boy, Ryan made the Maserati Marv comment, and I'm just like, boy, I'm glad I was at that game in person. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah. So let's end the show here on receivers. With the state of the wide receiver room cause the staff to hold a few extra scholarships, even if a couple 2024 kids want in order to have them to go into the portal to get receivers. Guys, this is a freebie. Fitz, I'll come back to you for this one. What do you think on portal receiver over prospect in 24?
So after that 2017 loss to Ohio State, Penn State came back and they were recruiting a couple of defensive ends, Micah Parsons, Jason Owe, and Tyreek Smith, who was actually committed to them at that point silently. And they said, okay, we need to get to the quarterback. So we're going to go over our number and take as many of these guys as possible, which is funny because they had Smith at that point, and then they ended up getting Parsons and Owe, and Smith flipped to Ohio State. I have to see a similar approach like that at receiver right now. Like, that's going to be a situation where, hey, we need to fix this because it is that bad. Like, it is that much of an elephant in the room that it is something that we need to address, whether that's 24 kids, whether that's portal kids. We went to the portal last year, essentially have failed in what they were trying to do there, and got to fix it ASAP because your window was this year and you missed it. And the window, I think, is a little bit smaller next year, but you've got to find some sort of weapon to do that. So yes, it's going to be a point where, and they have been going after receivers. They have 3 guys in this class right now, and it feels, and of course with the Josiah Brown injury, there's a little bit more emphasis there. Quentin Martin, who we talked about as a potential wide receiver, so you've got guys that are there, but you need to find more. Like, you need to figure out this log jam that you have further down on the depth chart that I wrote about yesterday on blueillustrated.com. If you take a look at that, you need to figure out, like, how do you turn that into some sort of production, because you can't win the Big Ten, you can't beat Michigan, you can't do all this stuff with essentially 2 receivers, and even then, like, you're kind of stretching the 1 and 2 given the performances that we've seen so far. So yes, that's got to be a point of emphasis for the staff to get as many of these guys in. And sometimes it's about going in bulk. And maybe that's what we see. Maybe we see 5 receivers in this class. You know, that is certainly a situation where they need a fix. Is it going to be a quick fix? Is it going to be, I don't know how it's all going to work out, but they need to figure out something similar to what they did after 2017 with those pass rushers.
You killed it. You answered 2 of the questions in the chat, bringing up Quentin Martin as a potential fix as well. Let's get to the last thing, and this is just, we ran out of time, so we're not going to get into this deep, but what's your take on how much of an advantage Michigan might have had with an alleged sign-stealing operation that was this elaborate? To the eager but still casual fan, seems like it would be a large advantage. Ryan, I know you were interested to at least kind of talk about this question. What have been your thoughts on the whole saga of the Michigan sign-stealing situation?
Let me just real quick. I know we're out of time, but like that last one, I really have want to mention too. Like, I feel like it's inevitable that we see some outgoing transfers. You know, so when we're talking about that balance, like,
oh yeah,
after everything we've seen this year, there's going to be outgoings there too. So I don't think it's going to impact.
The year after an assistant coaching change, you always have that at the position. But
right,
yes,
so 2024, as far as recruiting, I don't think it's really going to impact transfer. Like, I think we're going to see some outgoing guys. That'll be the incomings then, and that'll even that out. As far as the Michigan thing, man, this has been a fun story to follow. How about that? I think it's kind of one of those things where, like, do they know everything about every team? No, but I'm sure there's been some instances where, you know, big plays, big moments, whatever it is, and if they have somewhat of an advantage of what the formation will be or whatever it could be, you know, big third down moments, big goal line moments, whatever it may be, you know, those things have probably had a real impact over the years. But I also feel like it's just so stupid. Like, Michigan is a really good program right now. Like, did they really need to do this? This was just dumb for them. And now all the good stuff they've done over 2 years, everybody's just going to discredit it no matter what. And, you know, I'm sure it's helped them to some degree. It has to have helped them to some degree. I don't know if it helps them as much as fans of other Big Ten schools want to think it has. I'm sure there's, like I said, moments I'm sure it has. But man, this is just stupid. Like, you all the good you just did over 2 years, now everybody's going to point at it and laugh.
Right, and it brings into question chicken or the egg, because they were a team that couldn't get over the Ohio State hump, and suddenly they get over everything. Right. So you can build a narrative of the reason they were able to beat Ohio State and get on this roll and go to the college football playoff is because they had this advantage. And then, Fitz, that comes back to the next question. If you hear some head coaches say, this is absolutely nothing, everyone does some version of this, this is a nothing story, and then you have other people saying this is a massive story. So I guess, what kind of story is this to you?
Well, you're going to be surprised by this. I'm kind of in the middle. It's like baseball. You know, baseball has had cheating in it from the start. Football has also had cheating in it from the start. But like, it's sort of, you're taking a test as a C+ student, and then all of a sudden you get 100. Like, get a few answers wrong on purpose. Like, that's kind of the background here.
Yeah.
So like, to go from there to there, it's going to raise questions, and to do it seemingly as stupid as they did it. There was this guy did it with the paper trail and all the tickets and stuff like that. Like, that to me is just like, what are we doing here for a guy that's as detail oriented as Jim Harbaugh? Like, working, you know, anybody that works in that building has to be detail oriented as well. To do it this stupidly is, number one, very funny. Very funny. I don't want to like leave that one out. But number two, like, you're gonna expose yourself as potential frauds, even if the actual outcome was not something that changed the result of Penn State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, you know, things like that. I mean, that like, you're just casting doubt on yourself, and it's self-inflicted.
Yeah.
I will say that Washington Post story yesterday, they supposedly attended 8 Ohio State games. That's a big number. That did grab my attention there. I was thinking maybe like 1 or 2 for here, 1 or 2 for Penn State. 8. That's a big number.
Go to a Rutgers game. Get some of the questions wrong on purpose. You know, just like make it. Say that you're turning tickets. Those tickets are expensive. Say that you're turning it on its head, and you're running a small business because you're only making $55K as an analyst in that building. So, boy, that's yes, and we can't lose sight. I know that everybody's disappointed about the Ohio State thing. It's very funny. We have to acknowledge that.
It's but I think it's also true to form for for Michigan, a team and an identity built on, we are going to run through a very small hole and shove a lot of very large men through that small 3-yard gap, to be like, I don't care about the details. The details of subterfuge. We don't like subterfuge. We like being aggressive.
Right.
So
and there's no benefit of the doubt for knowing that, or for thinking that Harbaugh didn't know. Like, even if he didn't know, you're not going to win that in public court, like, or in the court of public opinion. Like, we've seen that, like, all over the place. So it's that's somebody mentioned public Venmo transactions.
That story yesterday made it clear that
might as well say for cheating.
Yeah, that story yesterday made it clear that there's more than just Connor Stallions doing this.
Yeah,
very clear. I mean, there was multiple people on that document. Read that Washington Post story yesterday.
Yeah, very good.
That was, I thought, one of the most enlightening ones yet. Anyway, we're an hour and
you guys crushed it. I don't want to keep you any longer. We got a bonus 5 minutes talking about Michigan and cheating, but we got to get on to the next thing, which is you guys got to go right and find out incredible details about who's coming to Penn State, insider information. They give all that for you over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. If you've enjoyed the show today, please like the video, subscribe to the site. We're going to be putting out more great content. We have another live show coming up tomorrow, and then, of course, the Tailgate Show, 9 a.m. outside the Bryce Jordan Center, myself and Aeneas Hawkins. I know he's fired up. We're going to be getting you a lot of good stuff coming up this weekend on here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. And until then, we'll talk to you later.